We are joined now by Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor on Twitter as we break down everything in the world of sports and more. He hasn't been on with us in a while because he's been ducking down to the beach and having long weekends, which I don't blame at all for him doing so. But LT, there's a lot to get into, and we started off the show talking about like how this is basically the greatest sports weekend ever, and that's where I want to kind of start with you. Is this a super sneaky, incredible August or what? I mean, I knew it was coming. But as you look around at just all of the available sports options, basically from noon to midnight every day, and maybe it's just so much more than maybe we would have anticipated because we've gone so long without any actual storylines to talk about. And now it's like NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, the PGA Championship is underway. And soon we're going to have, legitimate stories coming out of training camp in the NFL. I mean, I've been calling this August madness, but it feels like the NCAA tournament on steroids, that opening Thursday and Friday of the NCAA tournament. Does it feel like that to you?
It does, and I wish we could have it all the time. I know it's impossible, and obviously this is an atypical year, but, I'm digging the Major League Baseball. I grew up a guy that really enjoyed a 162-game season, and even before the old wild card format in 1994, I was never a baseball purist, but I've always been a huge baseball fan, and then it dipped off a little bit over the last few years just because the game has gotten so slow, and 162 is way too many. And I've always said 100 is the number, but now that we're a quarter of the way through the season and it just started, seems like yesterday, I'm absolutely loving it. And just the urgency, I think, because there's only 60 games in the regular season and the fact that you never know when they're going to shut down a series. So I've loved Major League Baseball. The NBA bubble, it's worked so far. I think even the camera angles, I think we were a little concerned on, what it was going to look like as far as spectators being in the stands. But, I give the networks a lot of credit. I think they've gotten creative with that. Teams are playing with urgency. You mentioned the PGA Championship, our first major. It's going to be an awesome weekend, man. Super excited about it. And then before we know it, we're going to have college football here.
All right, I'll get to college football here in a sec. But if you could only watch one sport this weekend, what's your number one draft pick?
It's probably going to be the PGA Championship, and that's weird for me to say. It's going to be that or the NBA. Just because this is our first major, and I'm always in a major pool, and so I've always got some skin in the game, and it makes it that much more exciting. So I think it's Saturday, Sunday, and I'm really interested to see what a Sunday final pairing is going to look like. Because I've casually watched a little bit of golf, and it hasn't been that dramatic for me. But if it comes down to a final putt on 18 late Sunday in the PGA Championship, it's just going to be really strange with no gallery.
Yeah, it was interesting coming down the stretch of the WGC event in Memphis because it was Brooks Koepka trying to make a late run at Justin Thomas, and he put the ball in the water. And Koepka obviously had a great round yesterday on Thursday, and so for that matter did Tiger Woods. How excited do you think the executives were at CBS with the idea Tiger shoots a -2? It would be, knock on wood, because I want him to be into the weekend too, it would take an epic collapse at this point for him not to make the cut after starting -2. Tiger into the weekend in a primetime golf event where you've got the West Coast. And what I love about this is a lot of you probably did what I did on Thursday night, stayed up and watched this thing all the way until the evening. Same thing happening on tonight with Friday night, late night. You can watch golf, relatively speaking, and then Saturday and Sunday too. I just love West Coast majors that allow you to watch them in primetime.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's one of the things that I don't like about the British Open. Obviously, I'm not really keen on getting up at 4 a.m. to watch golf.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I love the primetime golf on the West Coast, especially when it pertains to a major. So really excited about that as well. And I would absolutely love to see Tiger on Sunday just be in contention. I think most people would. I mean, it's been such a strange year. I think it would be perfect for Tiger to actually be in the mix.
There's no doubt at all. All right, you mentioned college football. You're at Jocks 94.5 Birmingham, big station, sports station down in Alabama, which arguably is the college football capital of America. What is your level of optimism about college football season now that we've got the ACC schedule, we got the Big Ten schedule, SEC, going to give us a schedule at some point in the near future. They're trying to iron out the details, and the coaches poll comes out with as we see it right now, Clemson 1, Ohio State 2. Well, I'll get to the coaches poll in a minute. Let me ask you this. Your optimism that a season in some form or fashion will happen? If you were betting.
I'm very optimistic now. Yeah, if I'm betting, I'm very optimistic there will be a season. Will it be an end to a season? I'm not positive. I was 50-50 a couple of weeks ago, but now that we've actually got tangible schedules to look at, that's extremely exciting. And I do think that we're going to kick this thing off. I personally think the SEC has made a mistake now pushing this thing back to September 26th. I think the Big Ten, the way they scheduled everything, starting week 1, I think that's the way to do it. It allows you some forgiveness on the backside if you do have to postpone some games. So I think they got it right. But I would go 90% we get a start of college football, and I'll go 70% we get a finish. I'm going to be optimistic about this because I think Major League Baseball, who even got it wrong on some levels with Marlins doing things they probably shouldn't have done, and maybe the same with the Cardinals, at least they're trying to figure out a way to continue to push this through. I think it would be much more difficult if you have to cancel, one of your few in-conference games. But I'm pretty optimistic right now, Clay.
How important for your business is college football existing? Like in Alabama, in Birmingham, where college football is, again, I think you're the heartbeat of college football in Birmingham. There are a lot of communities that love it, but the ratings data always reflects that Birmingham people in your metro market watch college football at a higher rate than anybody. How important is it that the season happens?
Well, Clay, I don't know if you remember about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, Malcolm Jenkins, safety for the Saints, came out and he said, look, football's not an essential business.
Yeah.
And I totally disagree with him. Maybe it's not for him. He's been in the league so long and he might have a pile of money. For me, it's an essential business. I basically pay 2 mortgages. I've got an ex-wife. I've got kids. It means everything to me and my family. I mean, without college football, not only do I host a 4-hour show, I also sell advertising. And you know what revenue happened or what happened to revenue once the pandemic hit. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of cash flow for a lot of businesses. I deal with a lot of mom and pops. And those same mom and pops that struggled in April and May are really, really going to struggle if the economy completely collapses, which it will in markets around here, from Birmingham to Tuscaloosa to Auburn. I can't even imagine throughout the Southeast. I mean, so much rides on this. It starts with the television contracts and just how it filters down just to the everyday guy. And I just know what it's already done to me in such a short time. And I can't even imagine if for whatever reason we weren't to have a college football season because I've got so many things tied in, not only the advertising, doing the 4-hour show, but there's, nighttime gigs. I'm out 3 or 4 times during the week, doing things for, beer companies and different bars and, just trying to make extra money. So without college football and also, for me, I don't know about you, man. I mean, it's my outlet. It's, that and the NFL, that's my hope. And that might sound sad, man, but after working a full week, man, the one thing I want to do on Saturday and Sunday is get on the couch and drink and watch and gamble. And without that, I know financially what it will do to me. And then you think about that will bleed into the holidays. It would just, I don't know, man, it would be really, really bad.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people focus on the player aspect. And I think in general, there's not enough focus on all of the surrounding parts of a college football or an NFL or sports season in general, right? Because there are so many people who aren't making millions of dollars a year at the very highest end associated with the sport. There are so many people out there that are connected, whether it's people like you and me through radio, which is, look, there are other sports going on. We'll see what happens there. But as you just mentioned, I mean, the guy selling beer, right? I mean, the ability for sports bars to open, restaurants that have a reliance on people coming in. I mean, it's really amazing, I think, to think about all of the different people who are connected in some form or fashion through their business to the sports industry.
It's insane. I mean, look, nobody's going to feel sorry for your illegal bookmaker, but there's a lot of guys out there that make a living, running a book. And those guys are out. I've got a website that personally had 0 revenue for 5 months.
Yeah.
Where
you give gambling picks.
Where I give gambling picks and people subscribe to it and their credit card is hit monthly. And right when those credit cards were hit, they were automatically, they were shot a refund, and that was for 5 consecutive months.
Yeah.
So completely dried up. And, it's just small things like that people really don't think about. And look, and I understand we're not the one in harm's way. These are the guys that have got to go out and they've got to travel and they get exposed and they're compromised a little bit more. But I don't know what it does just to the mentality of the typical guy out there that's raising a family and he's got a mortgage and he is so dependent upon income from this business. And I don't know what the percentages would be. I've heard so many different numbers and some are unrealistic, but some make sense. I know it's millions and millions of dollars, on, a daily basis. And, for a town like Tuscaloosa, we'll just use that as an example. I think I saw, a home weekend generates $90 million that would be lost if they weren't playing home games. So I don't know, man. The fallout would be catastrophic, in my opinion. You saw what it did just 3 or 4 months in what we would call so-called off months for sports. And the ones that drive the bus in college football and the NFL, if something was to happen there, it would be bad.
We're talking to Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor 94.5 Jocks in Birmingham. All right, let's go into the coaches poll. It got released yesterday. Number 1 overall, Clemson. Second spot, Ohio State. Alabama in the 3. Georgia in the 4. LSU 5. Oklahoma 6. Penn State 7. Florida Gators 8. Oregon and Notre Dame round out the top 10. Does anything jump out to you from a gambling perspective about who the coaches believe are the 10 best teams in the country?
I think the interesting thing right there is Notre Dame. I guess they would have been there before. When you start to look at their schedule's gotten easier. Would you agree with that?
It's an interesting point. I think obviously they already played Clemson. So I think there's just such a huge drop-off in the ACC in general. And I've made this analogy before, and I know you're a longtime college football fan, and I think you'll appreciate it. Clemson right now in the ACC is like what USC was back in the day in the Pac-12, right? Where you just see they're just head and shoulders above everybody else. And now with Notre Dame in, at least there's a top 10 caliber team there. But Notre Dame gets Clemson in South Bend. So that would at least theoretically be an advantage to Notre Dame in that game. But otherwise, I don't see anybody else in the ACC that can step to either of those teams.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think North Carolina's offense is going to be really good again with Sam Howell. You got 2,000-yard receivers coming back, 2 basic 1,000-yard rushers coming back, the offensive line. So I think Phil Longo did a really good job of that offense last year. I think North Carolina will be able to score a lot of points. Will they be able to stop teams like Clemson and Notre Dame? Not so sure. But I do think the ACC obviously has improved with the addition of Notre Dame, which is so strange to even talk about. There's so many unknowns going into the 2020 season. I think there's teams that could have I wouldn't be shocked if they're 11-1, but let me take that back. I wouldn't be shocked if they're 9-1, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they're 6-4. And one of those teams is LSU. And I don't know what you do with LSU because they had arguably the greatest season in college football history, going 15-0 last year. But I think there's going to be a major drop-off with LSU this year, and they're sitting there at number 5, but I don't know what you do with them.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge in general. They have a great deal of talent, but it will be an interesting study in how good Joe Burrow was. Because as good as LSU was last year, what do you think their record is? And they obviously went 15-0 and played out of their minds, and they were one of the greatest teams ever. But let's just say they have a good, decent quarterback instead of Joe Burrow, right? LSU having an elite-level quarterback is so mind-blowing to a lot of people out there because their offense was, 3 yards in a cloud of dust for most years, other than the 1 year they had Odell and Jarvis Landry and Zach Mettenberger slinging it around. But that's a team that I think was really talented, but I think they're probably a 9-3 caliber team if they just have a good quarterback as opposed to a transcendent one. They remind me a lot of that Auburn year with Cam Newton, where he covered up a lot of deficiencies on both sides of the ball otherwise with his otherworldly play. I feel like that's the case with LSU.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree, and I think it was a perfect storm. I think Joe Brady did such a good job with that offense, and I think Joe Burrow was a guy that built confidence week in, week out, and then a tremendous collection of receivers led by Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, who will be back. and Clyde Edwards-Helaire not nearly enough credit in that backfield. So I think they had tremendous weapons. I think Brady schematically, it's nothing we'd ever seen before at LSU. And I think not only the loss of Joe Brady, but also Joe Burrow. And I just don't think they're going to be able to replace that. And I don't even think they're going to come close to replicating that. And if you ask me right now, I'd probably put the over-under for wins, at 6.5. I think LSU's probably 7-3, maybe 6-4 this year.
You mentioned the fact that you've been watching some of the NBA, and we're talking to Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor 94.5 on Jocks. What do you make of Zion and the Pelicans? I know the Grizz have come in and been incredibly disappointing, but at least you can say maybe they overachieved during the course of the season, and they've certainly had injuries that have impacted their performance. But, for the Pelicans yesterday, in effectively a must-win game. The only team that the Pelicans have beaten are the Grizz, but they've got Sacramento, who's not a very good opponent. To give up 140 points to them and just get run, what in the world's going on there?
It's like nobody really wants that 8 slot.
Yeah.
Portland's playing like they want it. Memphis is just completely cashed out. They've hit bottom. And, New Orleans, right when they come back into the bubble, and I had the Jazz against them that first night. But, to limit minutes for Zion, and I'll say this, Zion doesn't look like he's in great shape right now.
Right.
He doesn't look like he wants to play a ton of defense. But you're right. To give up 140 points to the Kings, who I thought had completely tapped out. I don't know what to think, and you get teams like the Bucks and the Lakers that clinch, 1 seeds. They don't look like they're overly, happy to be playing right now either. I think this playoffs, I think it's going to be really fascinating down the stretch.
Do you buy
I'm
in?
not content. I'm not confident right now saying the Bucks or the Lakers will win this thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you buy into the fact that there is a substantial gap from Lakers, Clippers, everybody else? Do you buy into that idea, or do you think this thing's wide open?
I think it's pretty wide open, Clay. In the past, it seems like when we had a 1 seed out of the West, they were a strong one, especially when you look at Golden State. You just don't have that. And I do like the unpredictability now in the NBA. There are a lot of teams or a lot of people that believe going into the season, the Lakers were going to be fighting to get to the postseason.
That's right.
And now, obviously, the Lakers have got the number 1 seed, but I don't have a ton of confidence. With Rondo being out, Avery Bradley not coming back, I think there's a lot of questions on the perimeter for the Lakers. Obviously, you've got one of the best 1-2 punches out there in LeBron and AD, but as a Lakers fan, I don't have a ton of confidence. I'll be a little surprised if the Lakers were to win a championship. Now, a couple of months ago before the pandemic, I felt pretty good about them. I just don't feel good about them right now.
Last question for you has nothing to do with sports. Are you caught up now in Yellowstone, and what's your verdict on the show?
Okay, so I'm through 2 seasons, so I'm
Okay.
finally rolling into the 3rd season. I'll be caught up in the next week or 2. It has become a guilty pleasure. You and I talked about the pilot, hour and 32 minutes. I thought it was great. It was almost like a feature film.
Yeah.
I love Kevin Costner in the role as John Dutton. I think Cole Hauser has been a really underrated character actor for years, from Dazed and Confused to Good Will Hunting. And I love him in his role. He's a complete badass. But it's just so far-fetched. I think we talked about this on your show.
You
Bozeman,
looked up the
Montana,
murder rate in Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah, I think they've 8 murders over the last 15 years, and we had 8 in the first 3 or 4 episodes. So
Yeah, right.
If I can suspend reality for Dragons and Game of Thrones, it's hard to do in a show like Yellowstone because I just don't think it's needed. I really don't. I think the cinematography. I think you've got a good collection of actors there. I think the writing is really good. I just think they get out there with some of the storylines. When you let a bull go in a bar, there's just some things that are just completely unbelievable, but it has become a guilty pleasure. I don't know where you are on it. I'm one of those that I would recommend it, but just, it's more for enjoyment, but that's about it.
I've caught up with the overall show, so I'm watching it, and the thing I would say that I guess is an endorsement from my perspective is I'm watching it on the night it airs and fast forwarding through the commercials, and I don't even remember the last time I watched a show that had commercials at all, right? Game of Thrones to me was must-see television as it was scheduled, right? But I don't even remember the last time that I was sitting in front of, a screen on the night that episode airs, and I might start at 20 minutes after it starts, but I'm trying to finish it around the time that it finishes airing the first time. Otherwise I'm watching Showtime, HBO, whatever it is and not really even paying attention to when a show is scheduled. I can't even remember the last time I did it. Maybe The Office?
Yeah, I just started watching The Office a couple of years ago with my kids, and so that was a Netflix thing. So I was never on The Office when it was on network television. I mean, I almost go back to Lost. I mean, it's been
that was great. Yes, that was a long time ago. We're watching that with my 12-year-old.
Yeah, we've had a DVR now for so long, so I can't even. I mean, that's amazing that you're actually watching this in live time.
Yeah, well, I'm not watching the commercials, but I'm starting at like 20 minutes later. But, and my family was out of town the last couple of weekends, so on Sunday night I was like, well, I'll just sit back and watch Yellowstone. LT, appreciate the time, my man. We'll talk to you hopefully next week.
Have a great weekend, Clay. Enjoy the sports.
Will do. That's Lance Taylor at the Lance Taylor on Twitter, 94.5 Jocks down in Birmingham.